Will the iPhone 13 be late? Chances are, over the last couple of weeks, you probably heard a little something about this.
For more on auto sales and how big an issue the chip shortage is for the industry.
There's unprecedented chip shortages.
That the chip shortage is now hitting two of its most productive and profitable plants.
The chip shortage is a real thing, and it's affecting everyone from tech companies to car companies to lots of different businesses in between, which leads us to the obvious question, will it delay the iPhone 13 by a couple of weeks or by potentially a couple of months? Or is Apple's Tim Cook a super secret genius who can somehow predict the future before it actually happens? Maybe, just maybe, it's a little both. And a big thanks to Tacony Audio for sponsoring this video. As we start to move closer and closer to those summertime months, the temperature outside is not the only thing heating up these days. The Apple rumor mill is hot with new information about the iPhone 13, and it seems like every couple of days we learn more and more about what Apple is looking to launch this fall. Bigger battery, smaller notch, ProMotion display, new camera features, slightly tweaked design. There are lots and lots of reasons to get very excited about the iPhone 13 lineup coming pretty soon. But there's one big question kind of looming over all of this information, and that is, when is the iPhone 13 actually supposed to launch? Besides the original iPhone in 2007, every iPhone after that one stuck to a pretty similar schedule in terms of announcement and release. It was announced at an event, typically in the summer, and then released shortly thereafter. It actually wasn't until 2011 with the iPhone 4S that Apple shifted from announcing phones in the summer at WWDC to doing something in the fall at Apple's campus. And since the iPhone 4S back in 2011, every year that followed, like clockwork, over and over again, Apple typically would announce the iPhone in the fall, typically in September, and then release the phone shortly thereafter, either a week or a couple of weeks after the announcement. There were some kind of sort of weird split launches, like with the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10, but typically there's always been an announcement in September, and then the iPhones launched shortly after. Though that was not the case in 2020, where seemingly the state of the world seemed to kind of push Apple off of their track and delay the iPhone by about a month. We didn't get a September event, well we did, but it didn't show off the iPhone, but the iPhone's announcement was held off until October of 2020, and they also did sort of this weird split launch with the Mini and the Pro and the Pro Max and the regular 12. And this sort of seemed to kick off the issues that Apple would start to have with the iPhone behind the scenes during this time. You had critics who complained about that split launch with those kind of two different release dates for the different iPhone 12 models. You had a lot of analysts very worried over the slumping sales of the iPhone 12 mini, and then this growing chip shortage that became a bigger and bigger issue that was affecting everyone from those in the automotive industry to tech companies like LG and Samsung and Microsoft and Google. Even Tesla started to feel the burn from this a little bit, and everyone was affected in one way or another, not just those traditional tech companies that we probably would already think about. And look, I am not an expert on this subject, but I do kind of want to break this down sort of the best I can with my limited knowledge of economics and supply chain logistics, just so you kind of get an idea of why this is such a big deal and why the impact on it could potentially be so big as we move into the fall with the iPhone 13. Basically, this whole thing was sort of a chain reaction, kind of like a domino effect, where one domino fell, then another fell, and another fell, that basically was a bunch of little things in the beginning that led to much, much bigger issues as time progressed. At the start of the pandemic, many companies who either designed semiconductors or who manufactured them were forced to severely scale back operations or shut down entirely, depending on where they were located in the world, with different rules and laws and regulations. Suffice it to say, the industry was really shaken up a bit, and things were just kind of not operating as they normally would. At the same time production was scaling down, the demand for products with chips inside was obviously scaling up, with the rise of remote learning and working from home, and people just wanting to tinker with gadgets in their free time and trick out their surround system or buy a new TV, you had a lot of demand for computers and tablets and TVs, and the demand was growing more and more each day as more people had to work from home. You also had tech companies who continued to release new products as they normally would, with a surprisingly high high demand for these items. So new phones from Apple and Google and Samsung and other devices and from other companies continue to kind of roll out, which meant the demand for these chips just became increasingly higher and higher. And also, who of course could forget the new console launches that increased demand exponentially for things like the Series S and the X from Microsoft, and of course the PS5, which is still super hard to find to this day. And all of this seemed to kind of create this perfect storm, with production scaling down and demand ramping up. You had kind of these two opposing forces that had to be leveled out once again, which the industry is still working on right now. Obviously, productions are back up and running near 100% capacity and kind of full speed ahead. But even with that, there is such a backlog that analysts say there's going to be sort of this shortage and this squeeze on the semiconductor industry and chips for these devices for at least probably 6 months. So this is still going to be an issue for the foreseeable future, at least for the next couple of months. And this has led to all these companies fighting over the supply of chips available. You have companies like the game console makers like Microsoft and Sony trying to get chips for their new consoles. You have companies trying to put them in TVs. Heck, even Tesla is in the mix trying to get higher end processors so you can play games in the new Model S and Model X. Everyone has a vested interest in trying to get as many of these chips as possible. It is a crazy, complex issue that is very wide-reaching and has many different ramifications. But at the end of the day, we're here to answer the question, will this possibly delay the launch of the iPhone 13? Or was Apple better than all of us and kind of planning ahead with anticipation that something like this could happen? Now, Tim Cook obviously gets a lot of criticism for not being a product guy or a creative visionary genius like Steve Jobs or Johnny Ive, but if there is one thing that is totally in his domain that he is an expert of, it is supply chain management. When Tim Cook came to Apple originally in the 1990s, he was responsible for totally overhauling Apple's entire supply chain, from deliveries to contracts to logistics to production to inventory. He basically turned the entire thing around, which is really instrumental in getting Apple back on stable financial ground in the early 2000s. And even more than that, he was responsible for making early and big bets on emerging technologies and kind of predicting the future before it happened. Like in 2005, where he kind of was instrumental in having Apple make a big bet on solid state flash storage, which would turn out to be a really big deal and would cement Apple's lead in front of the competition for many years to come. Before we continue, I want to take a quick break and tell you how I just gave my AirPods Pro a massive upgrade, all made possible by this video's sponsor, Deconi Audio. They are the premier manufacturer of headphone accessories. Everything from ear pads, replacement tips, to their super popular nuggets. Deconi Audio has you and your comfort in mind and wants to give you a super comfortable audio experience. And these right here are the Deconi Audio Bulletz. They are super comfortable foam tips, here to give your AirPods Pro a much needed upgrade. And look, there is a lot I love about AirPods Pro. They're great, but the included silicone tips are not so great. It can be hard to find the right tip to fit your ear, they're constantly having to be adjusted, they might fall out, and they are just far from comfortable. That's why easily switching them out for the Deconi Audio Bulletz is such a big upgrade, because they solve all these issues plus a whole lot more. The foam tips of the Bulletz not only fit much more securely in my ear, but they are way more comfortable. Plus the seal of the memory foam does a great job of reducing outdoor noise, so noise cancellation is better as well. But best of all, Deconi Audio is offering a sample pack of the Bulletz that have small, medium, and large sizes, so you can find the size that works best for your ears to have the most secure and comfortable fit. So give your AirPods Pro some love, attention, and a much needed upgrade by getting the Deconi Audio Bulletz. You can learn more and check them out for yourself today at the link down below. And while you're there, check out all the Deconi Audio has to offer. They have a lot of great audio accessories, lots of really cool stuff, and you gotta check it out right now. So learn more and check out the Deconi Audio Bulletz and much more today at the link right down below. Obviously, a global pandemic can turn a lot of things completely sideways and kind of disrupt many industries, but you got to imagine that Apple, that is employing some of the best analysts, that has the best abilities to do forecasting and predictions and looking into the supply chains, you better imagine that at least someone there or some group inside of Cupertino was checking this out and making sure that the company was well aware of this before it really became a big problem. At least that's the hope. Interestingly enough, there is even some speculation and there are some theories out there that suggest that maybe models of the iPhone that aren't selling well, like the 12 mini, aren't actually poor performers, but Apple cut back on production numbers because they overbought with an expectation that some components and chips would be hard to find for upcoming iPhones. That they actually cut the orders for like the 12 mini, for example, not because it was performing poorly, but because they had more than they needed. They had overbought at a surplus and no longer needed to stockpile those components. Again, it's just speculation. There are just theories on this, but it does kind of make sense. Let me just throw that out there and you can make your decision on whether that is true or not. We also have to remember that Apple typically works ahead when it comes to iPhone production. I think the prevailing theory I've heard before, and probably many of you have heard, is that Apple is typically at least 1 year ahead on iPhone models. So when they launched the 12 series back in the fall of 2020, that they are already hard at work and kind of in somewhat of the final stages of at least kind of piecing together the final components and the design and the build of the upcoming iPhone 13 that's launching this year, this fall in 2021. There's also the simple fact that Apple is a big ticket customer for many companies around the world, and it is in their best interest that one of their biggest customers that heavily influences their bottom line remains a happy and current customer. For example, one of the biggest chip makers in the world, TSMC in Taiwan, is heavily dependent on Apple. There was a recent report that said that Apple contributed to 25% of the company's revenue. So it is in their best interest to make sure that Apple is happy. So in addition to Apple kind of pre-planning this out all ahead of time and pre-buying time in the factory to manufacture chips necessary for the iPhone, I also just wouldn't be surprised if there's a little leveraging power that Apple kind of has priority and can take the top spot if there's more time available, or if it comes down to that, over other companies. Again, this is just speculation, but it does make sense for a company that is so heavily dependent on Apple to make sure Apple, of course, remains happy. Also, if you want to know how this chip shortage is going to impact other companies in the tech space and beyond, then you got to check out a channel called Money Rush. In addition to the Apple Circle and the main John Rettinger channel, there is also a new channel called Money Rush where John Rettinger is breaking down the wild world of finance, going over the latest trends, breaking down some of the biggest news stories, and kind of giving you some simple tips and tricks on how to invest your money. If you want to know more about the inner workings of the finance world and more on this chip shortage and how it's going to impact other companies, then be sure to check out Money Rush and subscribe today at the link right down below. But as always, some things are simply out of Apple's control. And at first, analysts said that everyone was going to be affected by this chip shortage except Apple, but now some are just not so sure. Just recently, Foxconn said because of this chip shortage, they are expecting a 10% decline in exports from their factories. And Foxconn is one of the major companies around the world that is responsible for building the iPhone. They're one of the biggest and one of the longest lasting partners Apple has had, especially when it comes to the iPhone. Now, obviously, Foxconn works on many different products for many different companies, so Apple is just one of their customers, but many analysts are worried that inside that 10% of a decline in exports, the iPhone could be in there as a product that could be potentially affected. So you have some analysts very worried about the future of the iPhone 13 because of this chip shortage, and some not so worried. Ming-Chi Kuo, for example, doesn't think Apple's going to be very much affected by this and expects the iPhone 13 to be back on track for a launch in September. There's also some new news coming from overseas from TSMC. There's a rumor that they are actually going to start mass shipping the A15 early, ahead of schedule in May, so that's also good news for the iPhone. So we really don't know. It all kind of depends what news you believe, which analysts you follow. And in the end, we probably really won't know till we get much closer to that actual rumored September event. So ultimately, this kind of comes down to a couple different scenarios. Either the iPhone 13 launches in September, or it launches in October, or maybe in November. But if I was a betting man, I think Apple's got this pretty much under control, things are back on track, and I would expect an announcement and launch in September. Fingers crossed that that actually happens. Anyways, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this crazy chip shortage? What are your thoughts on the companies affected, like auto manufacturers shutting down production lines because they don't have the chips necessary to put in cars? Do you think this is going to be a long-lasting issue or will be corrected quickly? And how do you think Apple is affected, if at all? Do you think they pre-planned for this? Is Tim Cook a secret mastermind genius who can see the future? Or do you think the iPhone 13 could potentially be delayed just a bit? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments down below. As always, I am Robert Rosenfeld from the Apple Circle, and I always sincerely appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys in the next one.